Hey guys, and welcome back to Darkhorse Paranormal. In today's episode, we dive in to the vampire stalkers. On the 9th of March 1967, a rather unusual message appeared in the personal column of the Times newspaper, which read, "A witch of full powers is urgently sought to lift a 73-year-old curse and help restore the family fortunes of a troubled nobleman. Employment genuinely offered." The troubled nobleman was a Duke of Leinster, a 74-year-old bankrupt man who had experienced a dreadfully long run of bad luck in both his personal life and financial career. The aging gentleman believed his continual misfortune was the product of an old curse that had run in his family for 74 years. A witch of full powers duly responded to the Duke's printed plea for help and eventually lifted the curse. The Duke found himself solvent again and was able to re-enter high society. However, stranger messages have appeared in the personal columns of newspapers, both national and local, and one such message no doubt caught the attention of thousands of readers in the late summer of 1971. The peculiar eye-catching invitation appeared in a Birmingham newspaper first, before being printed in the Daily Mirror a week afterwards, and it stated, "Do you have an open mind towards the supernatural? Do you have the courage to investigate ghosts and the uncanny? Good pay for the right people. Interested parties should send an SAA to Mr. Will Naismith, Lansdowne House, Berkeley Square, London, W1X6AA." One of the first people to respond to this advertisement was a 21-year-old from Birmingham, named Barry Cody. Unemployed and bored, he'd been travelling the situation's vacant pages of his local newspaper and had been considering a career as a cadet in the Royal Navy, for which he would receive then pricely sum of £21 per week. But now his attention had been graded by the mysterious Mr. Nailsmith's invitation to chase ghosts and ghouls. Barry had become interested in the occult since the age of 15, and so he sent a self-addressed envelope to Nailsmith's address in London and received an A4-sized piece of paper outlining the work involved in Mr. Nailsmith's Supernatural Investigations Bureau. The pay was £30 a week, but there were a few catches. The successful applicant would have to relocate to Berkeley Square in the very desirable district of London's Mayfair. But the hours of the job were irregular by their very nature, as ghosts and other supernatural entities do not limit their paranormal activities to a 9-to-5 shift. All the same, Barry went for the interview at Berkeley Square and was questioned by a 70-year-old Mr. Nailsmith, who was wheelchair-bound for almost an hour. 5 days afterwards, the young man received exciting news by post at his Birmingham home. He was to start work on Wednesday the 29th of September at 9 a.m. Barry and 2 other successful applicants to the offbeat advertisement, 32-year-old Liz Brooks of Nottingham and 45-year-old Charles Wickham of Bury St Edmunds met at the altar room of William Nailsmith's impressive London residence. An elderly female secretary ushered the trio into a cosy study with a carved oak panel walls, a grand marble fireplace, and long stained glass windows featuring the Latin motto, Sincreata Dello Vero, which is knowledge, Jesus Fara. The three trainee investigators were serviced off coffee and given a formal atmosphere by Mr. Nailsmith talked to them about the areas of his research: ghosts, ghouls, sensory deprivations, psychiatry, doppelgangers, dimensions, and vampires. Every subject of the paranormal Nailsmith discussed perfunctorily seemed to have some element of credibility, but the topic of vampires seemed out of place and rather dated to the mind of Barry Cody, and he expressed his skepticism to his new employer. Nailsmith put on a pair of binoculars retrieved by a slim folder from a pile of papers on his desk. He opened it and read out a letter from a 38-year-old Hounslow woman named Miss Miller, who believed she was being haunted by what she called a biting poltergeist. For 3 months between January the 10th and the 12th of March 1971, Mrs. Miller had been awakened in the night with alarming sensations of being bitten on the neck, breasts and thighs. On 2 occasions, her unseen biter broke the skin of the woman's neck and drew her blood. In the end, Mrs. Miller had left the flat in the middle of the night after seeing a vampirous outline of a man standing over a bed. William Nailsmith had investigated Mrs. Miller's flat, as well as a flat below hers, which had lain vacant for some time, apparently because it had a reputation for being haunted by a man in black. The ghost had been active in the flat since 1920s, according to several other people living next door in the haunted property. Mr. Nailsmith was a man of considerable wealth, and he rented both flats for 3 months, hoping to confront the vampiric entity that had terrified Mrs. Miller. Almost a week into his vigil, Nailsmith had encountered the malobservation of a man in late Victorian attire by candlelight by the downstairs flat at 11:50 p.m. Suspecting the ghost was in fact a vampire, Nailsmith wore a rosary with a silver crucifix, carried a pile of holy water, a leather-bound copy of the Holy Bible, several cloves of garlic, and a long stake of hawthorn wood. In addition to these items, Nailsmith had at his disposal a special torch fitted with fragments that gave off ultraviolet light to simulate sunlight, something which was thought to vaporize the skin of a vampire. Nailsmith never had the chance to test out his novel flashlight when the suspected vampire materialized and then attacked him with the lightning. It became to throttle the elderly investigator. But upon seeing the rosary beads and crucifix around his neck, it threw him down on the sofa and ran towards the empty dark mouth of the fireplace and vanished, leaving a musky smell in his wake. Nailsmith, an angina sufferer, took his heart pill and gradually recovered from the incredible attack. He was unfortunately unable to continue the vigil after his health deteriorated, and he ended up confined to a wheelchair. He returned to Berkeley Square and spent days trying to trace a good medium. He found one through a recommendation of a friend, and she was Mrs. Ivory Jones of Camden Town. Ivory was taken to the haunted flats in Hounslow during the daytime, and she received distinct impressions of paradoxal, conductory nature. She saw an angelic-faced reverend of long ago, delivering a sermon from a pulpit, and believed he had a surname which sounded like Leighton, but the same man had endured to be Babsy and orgies and be cannibalistic urges. He had and feared with several bodies lying in some sort of chapel of rest, and on one occasion he had it even restored to exhuming the body of a woman so he could cut out her heart, and he even ate it roasted. The medium became so distressed that she turned into this bespectacled Victorian clergyman. She almost fainted and had to be taken outside by a nailsmith to gulp fresh air. Mrs. Jones warned Ainsworth to leave the flat well alone because he's evil, and now he has chosen to walk the darkness because if he goes across, he'll go straight to hell. The medium refused to offer any further help, but Nailsmith was determined to get the lay on the vampire. Barry Cody still rejected the idea that vampires existed, and so Nailsmith laid down a challenge. If you don't believe in vampires, I dare you to stay in the haunted flats for a week. What do you say? Barry secretly feared he would meet something inhuman, but did not want to seem a coward in front of his co-investigators, Liz Brooks and Charles Whitman. So he accepted the challenge. Nailsmith gave Barry a crash course on vampire slaughtering and warned him that he should never ever, under any circumstances, fall for the deceptions of a vampire. In a stern voice, the old man said, "They often pretend they are human in reality, and will beg you to spare their lives. Some use hypnosis to gain the upper hand, so avoid eye contact, kill, and ask questions later." On the first day of September, Barry Cody arrived at the house that had been divided into two flats from the moment the taxi left him at the front door of the Victorian dwelling. He had the feeling he was being watched. He settled down in the ground floor flat, and instead of burning candles, Miss Nailsmith had suggested, Barry switched on the lights in the kitchen, bedroom, hall, and lounge. Every hour or so, he'll go gingerly upstairs to the upstairs flat, with the ultraviolet torch in one hand and a Bible in the other, and make a courtesy inspection of the rooms. The first night passed without incident, and around 2:40 a.m., Barry fell into an uneasy sleep as he listened to his translator radio. On the following evening, at 8:03, Barry heard a noise in the kitchen, and when he went to investigate, he saw a boy of about 9 or 10 opening a window over the sink. The boy climbed into the kitchen and was startled to see Barry standing in the doorway leading to the hall. "What's your game, lad?" Barry asked the junior intruder. The boy continues to glaze in astonishment at the investigator of the unknown, and for a moment then stammered out a reply. "I'm looking for my brother Jim," he said nervously. "Well, here, so beat it," Barry told him, waving him away with the unit ultraviolet torch. "Why are you here?" The boy stood in the stone sink, looking Barry up and down. He seemed less nervous now. "Never you mind. Now get out of here before I go and call the police," said Barry. And all of a sudden, bizarre thought entered his head. Could this child be something immune in disguise? The younger trespasser seemed fixated with the adapted torch Barry held, and his eyes had the wisdom that seemed far in advance of his years. Barry switched on the ultraviolet torch and aimed his beam at the boy, and he let out a scream as his face instantly turned dark red. He held out a small pale hand to shield his eyes from the scorching beam of synthetic sunlight, and they too turned dark with small black blisters. The boy turned away from Barry, dived straight through an open window into the darkness of the yard, and ran off squealing. Barry stood there in shock for a moment, and then decided enough's enough. He abandoned his vigil leaving some of the equipment behind and headed back to the Supernatural Investigations Bureau in Berkeley Square. Mr. Nailsmith was initially furious at Barry for his declaration of duty, but later sympathized with the young man for the way he had reacted to something terrifying that was outside of most people's everyday experience. The second vigil at the Haunted Flats took place 3 days later, and on this occasion Liz Brooks joined Barry Cody. At 10:45 on the first night of the Vampire Watch, Barry and Liz heard footsteps in the upstairs flat, went to investigate, and understandably nervous state. They checked the lounge first and found nothing amiss there, then proceeded to the bedroom, where a strange sweet smell, possibly lavender, was evident. An old wardrobe stood in the corner, and Liz glanced at this, and then turned towards the bedroom door, pulling Barry and his elbow after her. "What's wrong?" Barry asked, indifferently, knowing that something spoke to his colleague. Not until she had rented the room downstairs flat did she reveal that what had chilled her. When she had glanced at the wardrobe in the bedroom of the upstairs flat, Liz had noticed the wardrobe door had been slightly ajar, and two grey-looking fingers had been slightly protruding from the gap in the door. It was as if someone had been inside the wardrobe, keeping the door closed over, with the first and second fingers. After Liz related this, she and Barry heard footsteps upstairs once again. The two investigators of the paranormal stood stock still. The footsteps were coming down the stairs to the ground floor flat. A rattling sound was heard in the hallway. The thing upstairs was opening the fuse box in the communal hallway. It removed the fuses and plunged the flats into the darkness in a confused stage. Barry rummaged through the holdall, and by some sense of touch, he felt an 18-inch hawthorn stake and wooden mallet and grabbed them. Liz's trembling hand seized the ultraviolet torch. She slid the switch, but the torch wasn't working. The filaments had burnt out or broken. She located a full-size Gordon's gin bottle, filled it with holy water and a wooden cross. The door burst open in a heartbeat, something knocked Liz to the ground. She tried to scream but felt cold lips and a tongue pressing into her open mouth. Strong, icy hands grabbed her throat and chest, pinning her to the ground. Barry felt intense nausea as he stumbled towards the shadowy thing covering Liz Brooks. He stabbed the wooden hawthorn stake into its back and slammed the mallet down, but the wooden hammer glanced off the head of the stake and struck his thumb. Barry's attempt to stake the fabric being distracted it for the moment, and in that window of opportunity Liz lashed out with the gin bottle, filled the blessed water, and smashed it on the supernatural attacker. The weird assailant let out a long, agonized shriek, then was heard running out of the room down the hallway towards the kitchen. Barry picked up Liz, and the two of them hurried into the street through the front door. This was the day when mobile phones were unheard of, and so the other two vampire hunters went to a public telephone box to call Nailsmith. He told them to return to the flats to put on the fuses back into the box, but Liz and Barry would not enter the house until the following morning, when the light of dawn evaporated the fears of the night before. After that eventful night, there were no further strange going on in the flats, as if the vampire and the possible vampiric child had had enough. Research has shown that Reverend Layton lived at the house in Hounslow in the 1890s, so perhaps the medium Ivory Jones was right. How then did the depraved Reverend become a vampire after death? Occult law states that suicide, some witches, evil murderers, men of the cloth, who are being excommunicated because they have turned to the devil, and those who have been bitten by a vampire may become vampires themselves 40 days after death. It is not hard to imagine the post-death fate of the soul of such a man as the reverend who molested dead bodies entrusted into the spiritual care, who ate a dead woman's heart and entered into sexual intercourse with animals. Even by vampire standards, the reverend was elevated a rotten specimen. Well, that's it, guys. I'll leave you there with the vampire stalkers. Feel free to tune in, like and subscribe for next week's, where we jump into the Highgate vampire. Until then, sleep tight.